Welcome to tonight's webinar from Brown University's School of Professional Studies. The mission of Brown University is to serve the community, the nation, and the world by discovering, communicating, and preserving knowledge and understanding in a spirit of free inquiry. The Masters of Leadership in Healthcare at Brown's School of Professional Studies is guided by that mission and seeks to develop healthcare leaders for the future. In the spirit of serving our communities, the nation, and the world, we're excited to be launching this series titled Lessons in Leadership, Let's Talk Healthcare. These sessions on leadership will cover a wide variety of topics delivered by academic leaders and executive practitioners in the field. These sessions are open to anyone who would like to join us, so please invite your colleagues and team members to future sessions. All of the future sessions are listed on our website. And in fact, our prior sessions, if you go to the website, will take you to recordings of our prior sessions. So let's get to it. Dionne is the Executive Director of CMC Procurement at Moderna. Prior to Moderna, Dionne had a 16-year career at Amgen, where she held various titles, finishing her career there as Director of Global Strategic Sourcing. Dionne is also a proud graduate of our MHL program, and we're so pleased that she would come back and join us tonight to have this session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dionne.
Great. Thank you, Sandy, and Brown University School of Professional Studies for allowing me to speak today. Thank you to those on the call who are spending part of their evening with me and to those who will be listening at a later date. I'm very honored to be presenting to you this evening as a 2017 graduate of the Executive Master's Healthcare Leadership Program from Brown University. Before I start talking about my Moderna experience, I first want to tell you a little bit about my journey that led me to Moderna to be able to share this talk with you today. In addition, I will review our supply chain journey and distribution challenges that we encountered and the leadership lessons we learned along the way. So this slide represents a large part of my personal and professional journey. I list my family first because they are my everything. My husband is a physician and professor at Brown University, and I have two children, 18 and 15, who keep us very busy and young as well. I started my career interning during college at Pricewaterhouse, now known as PricewaterhouseCoopers. This was a time where women were just allowed to wear pants in the workplace and bag brown lunches were frowned upon. However, I would say my 10 years of consulting was my MBA by working in several industries and Fortune 500 companies across this country. I left shortly after 9/11 due to all the travel changes because I was 100% on the road during my consulting years. After PricewaterhouseCoopers, I worked for American Eagles Outfitters in their corporate office while my fiance, now husband, was completing his fellowship at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. We moved to Rhode Island due to my husband's job at Brown, and I started my career in biotech with Amgen. A job, by the way, my husband said that I would most likely not get because I had a business background and not scientific, but I always love proving him wrong. But Amgen was looking for that consulting experience to enhance their project management organization, and I started there in the early 2000s. My sourcing procurement career also started at Amgen after a few short years in the project management and training functions. Overall, I ended up 16 years with them, and during that time I was promoted and my scope continued to increase over the years. Personally, I was also faced with raising young children, working full-time, and taking care of aging parents while getting my EMHL at Brown University during some of that time. Looking back, I'm not sure how I did it all, other than acknowledging my husband for his support during those years. I did lose my mother in 2016 due to Alzheimer's 1 week after I presented my thesis at Brown. I realized then that I was truly part of the sandwich generation. Throughout my career, I had several key role models and mentors at Amgen, and also Brown colleagues who were always willing to listen and provide feedback. It was a career of serving patients, one of which my husband, who has psoriatic rheumatoid arthritis and took one of Amgen's products. And it was also a stepping stone of finding my sweet spot in sourcing and procurement. Working in procurement combines my love for negotiation, law, project management, and consulting. I also listed community here on this slide as well. I have been involved in the local Alzheimer's Association and several school fundraisers. However, this is still an area that I wish I could spend more time and hopefully one day be involved serving on a board. I left Amgen in 2019 and worked for Medtronic until Moderna came along only 8 months later. I was faced with a decision in April 2020 to take a risk of a startup at a company where the vaccine may or may not work, or stay with a stable large company like Medtronic. My husband and I are not known as risk takers. However, he said to me, "This is what I do in biotech, so give it my all and let's see what happens." Well, you all know what has happened with Moderna. However, I will now go into what we faced as an organization during these past 2.5 years. Since I do not know the background of everyone on the call, I will provide you with just a few definitions. First, what is CMC? My title is CMC Executive Director in Procurement. CMC is an acronym for Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls, which are really crucial activities when developing new pharmaceutical products. CMC involves defining manufacturing processes and product specifications that must be followed and met in order to ensure product safety and consistency between batches. CMC begins with a lead compound, is identified through drug discovery, and continues through all the remaining stages of the drug development lifecycle. In addition to the pharmaceutical product, CMC also applies to the facility where its manufacturing occurs. As a sourcing team, we support what we would say the direct side of the business, which includes supply chain, logistics, distribution, manufacturing, contract manufacturing, tech development, and many more. Some of you may say, but what's procurement? So just real quick, I'll just say it's really the buying of direct and indirect goods. But there's a part of procurement that focuses on sourcing. Sourcing is where we identify a need in the market. We'll go out and source the market for potential options, select a supplier through a proposal process, and then manage the contract, the terms, and negotiations. Our role during the pandemic was to ensure we had the raw materials available to meet the demand, as well as working with the suppliers to ensure they had all the materials required so they can also manufacture accordingly. We worked every day with the US government via Operation Warp Speed to ensure we never stopped production. This slide here shows all the activities that we were involved in during that process. The procurement definition represents what sourcing is normally like in a typical environment. However, this slide represents what it felt like when we were working sometimes in pure exhaustion while the world was closing down. By now, many probably already know we refer messenger RNA as the software of life. What some people do not know, 1 trillion times a day, every one of us, every human body, translates a portion of DNA protein through messenger RNA. The vision of the company was, what if we could use this remarkable machine that is inside each of our bodies and use it into making drugs, products, curing disease, and treating disease? This was the origin of the company. We believed if messenger RNA was going to work once, it would likely work many times. So this is our journey. We started with vaccines and then into cancer vaccines, rare disease, and now into other modalities. Vaccines, however, was the first one. We were known as a platform company, not a product company, and it was not normal for a 5-year-old company to build a $100 million plant. But the idea that one vaccine would work, we knew many would work. We built the Norwood, Massachusetts plant exclusively for clinical manufacturing, but we knew the transition to commercial would be relatively fast. However, we did not know what was coming our way. We needed to establish the technology and funding, as well as confidence in the investor market. We were very excited about how fast we were growing, and then COVID-19 arrived. A few days within the pandemic, we received the sequence. There was a meeting that lasted several hours, whether we should jump in or not into this vaccine race. We knew that if we decided to forge ahead, we would not go back. We made the decision around mid-January, and we produced a few candidates of messenger RNA. Around February 7th, we had the first GMP batch of the vaccine as we know it, just a few hundred doses at that time. After that point, we released the batch and waited for the go-ahead of the clinical trial, which happened very fast as well. There are things we had in place. We had technology, we had programs that we had done before, and different phases of the clinical program with identical technology. And we had partnerships like the FDA. However, we did not have infrastructure, scale, and we did not have money. So how could a team of 1,000 people at this time go from a novel virus sequence to a COVID-19 vaccine with 94% efficacy and an emergency use authorization in 11 months? A few reasons on this fact. 10 years of building an industry-leading messenger RNA technology platform. Over 20 development candidates in progress leveraging the platform. Clear decisions and commitment of our executive leadership and board of directors. Unparalleled partnership between government, suppliers, contract manufacturing organizations, 3PLs, and innovators. Dedication from team members on the mission. By March of 2020, we had already produced our first batch of mRNA 1273 on its way to becoming Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. We had leveraged our small-scale capabilities in our internal manufacturing site that had opened its doors in 2018 when Moderna only had development candidates in phase 1 trials. One of the many bold decisions the company had taken in the past that enabled our readiness. The development, manufacturing, quality teams had designed, produced, tested, and delivered the vaccine in 42 days. What Dr. Tony Fauci described as the land speed record. We knew that if the vaccine were proved safe and effective, we had a journey ahead of us. There were so many questions. How much can we make? How quickly can we scale up or scale out, and where? Where are we going to find all of these materials that we require? Where are we going to fill and package all the vaccines? So we set out to make a plan with our newly established CMC Project Management Office. We defined our initial target number of doses to supply. We determined the target production presentation. We defined the operational steps, anticipated the line balancing, and required equipment. We modeled the roles, resources, shifts, and organizational structure. The plan was daunting, but it was clear. Now it was time to pressure test the plan across 5 work streams quickly and in parallel. How are all the constrained materials and overall requirements going to be met? We had to understand those gaps. We developed a hiring plan across the organization, which included several hundred operation associates alone. How quickly can we design, build, commission, and qualify the expanded manufacturing space? We needed to identify and understand best case lead times for processing equipment, including digital integration. Can we get all the building materials and air handling equipment in time? In one instance, the facility expansion project was about to impact critical path. It was late on a Saturday, and the air handler was in Missouri, and we would not be able to travel on the highways on a Sunday, given it was a wide load. Luckily, we had the support of the US government and Operation Warp Speed Logistics Liaison. The colonel was able to connect with Homeland Security, who contacted the heads of the state police and the other 5 states between Missouri and Massachusetts. We were able to get police escorts transitioning at each border, so the shipment was able to move with no red lights. And by Monday morning, the air handler was hoisted off the trailer into place just in time. To no one's surprise, there were risks in the overall plan. Some equipment had as much as 12 months lead time, but there were possibilities in clear engagement with senior leaders in each of those companies. Some materials were limited as much as only 20% of the overall requirements. But we pushed forward with our plan, knowing that we could relentlessly attack the issues one by one. Our hiring campaign started with an industrialized approach. Individual interviews were replaced with panel interviews in the evenings following a full day of work, and HR had already evaluated each candidate and was waiting at the end of the panel to present an offer if the interview was successful. And at many times, they were not in all cases. This approach, though, saved substantial time and allowed new employees to start early and begin training on simulation equipment that had been designed specifically to accelerate learning. By late 2020, we solved many of the initial constrained materials. Suppliers across the world stepped up to prioritize our materials, increasing supply by as much as 4,000% of what they had previously supplied to us. But there were a few things that were still issues, not for want of trying, but they were still limited by capital, initial process limitations, as well as headcount. To resolve these constraints, we focused on inspiring our suppliers to the mission, building relationships, and setting up joint teams with experts from Moderna and the suppliers to support the development solutions to each constraint. Solutions included manufacturing process changes to improve efficiency or reduce dependency on bottlenecks, process transfers to our contract manufacturing organizations, and in a few cases, onboarding additional sources of supply. But opportunities to do so were in such a unique and new technology space. Since mid-2020, there has been a hypercare mentality within procurement, material planning, and technical experts to monitor, support, and resolve issues within the supplier base. Again, through our support of Operation Warp Speed officers, we were able to leverage logistics support to solve our material constraints as well as our supplier material constraints. The partnerships between our suppliers, Operation Warp Speed, and Moderna was crucial to our success. Weekly, we were still meeting with all our key suppliers to identify risks, align on deliveries, and simply stay connected and maintain the lines of communication. The human-to-human element in these relationships cannot be underestimated to solving problems when they arise. As a supply chain organization, we were likely right-sized for the phase 2 clinical supply at the beginning of 2020. But branching into large-scale supply and ultimately into global commercial supply was going to require some additional horsepower. We evaluated the projected activities we were going to face: increased supply coordination across multiple regions, massive increase on material spend, global distribution, production execution management, master data management, and packaging development management, just to name a few. But we could not just hire for talent and potential. There was no time for training, and existing processes were not in place to train upon. Instead, we decided to hire for immediate impact. We needed to rely upon experience and proven capability to apply judgment and develop processes quickly. I was able to increase my team from 1 to 14 over 2 years. Everyone was hired virtually, based in the US, Switzerland, and Poland. And I'm so proud of the team, and I could not have done it without them. As our new members started to join in 2020, we had the same challenges that we globally faced over these last few years. Video conferences for everything, introductions, virtual site tours, shadowing others for on-the-job training, crucial conversations. I think I met my manager about a year later or so in person, who hired me virtually. I was one of the first Moderna employees onboarding being virtual. So we made the most of the situation. We promoted an environment of cameras on, remained focused and engaged, and a speak-up culture. Inclusion, collaboration, freedom to ask questions and challenge has led us to become a stronger team that has now seamlessly transitioned into more and more face-to-face interactions this year. In October 2020, after a summer of hypercare to secure the materials we required, and watching in amazement as my colleagues across the company had success on milestone after milestone, from process scale-up to CMO scale-up, to clinical data indicating positive outcomes, we had entered a new phase. We had completed our large-scale qualification batches and were moving into producing our first campaign of vaccines, and we were elated. However, in parallel, we still had these personal lives. So in addition to me working on this vaccine, during the same time, I had lost my father and realized with these milestones that were achieved that I know he would be so proud of what we were doing. In December 2020, we reached one of the most pivotal milestones as an organization. We received emergency use authorization and began distribution of the vaccine. Through curiosity and our bold, relentless, and collaborative approach, we had achieved what seemed improbable, if not impossible. We went from that novel virus sequence to a COVID-19 vaccine with 94% efficacy and an EUA in 11 months. We continue to make strides forward in building our global capacities and capabilities and collaboration. Through our teamwork and dedication, we have surpassed our initial milestones. You may ask, which are the major or main lessons that we've learned? We established a clear plan to focus the organization, communicating open and quickly about risks that need support and attention. Divide and conquer with trust that parallel work streams will succeed, and keep pushing forward and celebrate the milestones along the way. We are excited about our potential in our pipeline. We have grown to approximately 3,400 employees, which I joined, it was around the 900s. This slide represents our growth and expansion around the globe, and I feel truly proud to be part of this organization. As we move into the leadership part of the talk, I wanted to quickly show you our Moderna mindsets and values. These were exhibited during these last 2.5 years. Through the pandemic, we definitely accepted risk. We acted with urgency. We pushed past the possible. We pursued options in parallel. All of these are examples of what we used as guidelines through these past 2.5 years. And I state here, Happy Wednesday, because during our multiple CMC leadership team meetings that were held every day, sometimes multiple times a day, our Chief Technology Officer would state at the end of every meeting, Happy Wednesday, because every day, including the weekend, felt like a Wednesday. So what are these leadership lessons that came out of this pandemic experience that I encountered? The first one is leadership's not a crown. It's bringing the best out in others. It's more of a responsibility to make those around you better. One of the things that I value from my time at Moderna is how approachable everyone is. The pandemic was a marathon, not a sprint. And we all had our good days and our bad days. It was about motivating colleagues who might be having a bad day and picking up people when they are down. The second one is about communication and transparency. One of my proudest accomplishments with the team is having an open virtual door policy where those who report to me felt like they could come to me with anything. Likewise, I always felt that I could do the same with those above me in the organization. Interestingly enough, shortly after I joined the organization, they had hired my previous CFO. I think it says a lot about the organization that I had many interactions with the CFO in the Moderna environment, however, had very limited exposure at my previous environment. So having that communication in the new world in the pandemic was so critical. I'm very fortunate to work with the leaders at Moderna these past few years who come from leadership roles across multiple pharma, biotech companies around the world. I continuously learn from them and thank them for providing me with that open dialogue. Even as leaders, you can never stop listening and learning from others. The other one here is hire individuals who complement your weaknesses. I now have a team of 14, and I think they all have certain skills that I wish I had. I think that is why we are so successful as a team, because we complement each other. This became very evident in every contract negotiation working under the Defense Production Act to ensure production in the US and worldwide. Keep it light is also one of my favorites. Obviously, you can't get any bigger than working on a vaccine during a pandemic. It was pretty overwhelming at times, particularly when I would listen to the nightly news or hear stories from my husband about what was going on outside of Moderna. One of the best compliments that I heard from another VP is, "It looks like your team is always having fun." Yes, we worked hard regardless of the circumstances, but I also learned to laugh at myself and with others based on a situation. Sometimes you have to in order to motivate those around you. Reward and recognize. I think too often as a manager, we take those of us around us for granted, and we're quick to scoop up the praises that come our way. I have learned as a manager through that you really need to recognize those around you. My success is their success and vice versa. Bottom line, I am nothing without my team, even when it was just the two of us at the very beginning in 2020. And the last lesson is taking risks and being proud of what you do. Regardless of what I do for the rest of my career, I know that 2020 will be one of the years that defines me both professionally and as a person. It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't taken the safe route and stayed at my prior company. Sometimes I really think we avoid hard work because it is hard and opt for the safe approach. There were many times in 2020 when I would look at my husband in tears and question whether or not I could do this job. With all the weight of responsibilities that working on the vaccine entailed. There were a lot of long days and periods of exhaustion. This is what I would lean on my family, go for a walk, okay, or have that glass of wine. But I'm really glad that I didn't take the easy way out when I was faced with the decision to leave my safe job. I hope you all have similar situations and opportunities in your career when they arise, that you take the bull by the horns. Let's just hope it's not for another pandemic. Thank you. Open for any questions, Sandy.
Thank you so much, Dionne. That was really amazing. And what a remarkable journey you and Moderna have been through over the last 2.5 years. Just simply amazing. Just in awe of a lot of what you said. So folks can enter questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. So go ahead and do those things. And I'll get started with talk to me a little bit about the culture Because growing from 1,000 to 3,000, what were the types of things that the company did to try and maintain that culture that was probably already established at the company?
So the culture is, I think, what keeps and kept the organization going for these past few years, including today. Our CEO has always made it very clear to us that we don't want to be like big pharma. And I'm not criticizing big pharma when I say that, but I think we've been doing an excellent job at staying close and connected, even though we've grown so quickly. So yes, there's new faces and new names on our calls, but I think his style and approach to his leaders and to his management team is still trying to keep that close connected company that it was when he started it many, years before in 2008 and 2005. And we continue to do that. And I can't say what it is that does it, even though we've grown. But I think because he always says those mindsets are what's key. And if you see those mindsets, I think it's what keeps that culture thinking the same way. And removing viscosity is one that, you might see in big companies and not necessarily big pharma, but having those in your mindsets, I think helps you ensure that we stay connected and close and grow as a culture in a company.
Awesome. So the original intention of the mRNA platform was, like I'm sure vaccines was one of the options of the use for the platform, if you will.
Mhm.
Where does the company go from here? I mean,
I'm so excited about the future of the company. Our pipeline is very strong with several programs in phase 3 clinical trials, such as RSV, CMV, flu, and others. In addition, we also have different modalities in rare disease. Excited about the future ahead of our personalized cancer vaccine, and many other modalities that we're going to be getting into and launching in the coming years. So I'm just truly excited and to be part of what Moderna is going to be in the next 10 years and how they're going to continue to grow.
Yeah, it's the sort of biotech technology just seems to have so much potential.
It does.
And so for any number of different disease states and challenges that we're facing as humans. So this is I'm sure it was amazing to be a part of.
Absolutely.
We do have a question.
Great.
And what are some of the challenges you encountered during the heat of the pandemic related to production? So all of a sudden you had built the one production facility, but how do you go to producing millions of doses of vaccines?
Yeah, I think on the second day I was hired, I was in negotiation right away. What we had to do, and one of our challenges, as I stated, was building to scale. And we relied quickly on our contract manufacturers that was right there with the same passion and same desire to serve the need of the world and the country. And we quickly partnered. It was those relationships and partnerships that had already previously existed with some of them that immediately allowed us to get started in a negotiation, in a contract. And how many lines did we need? And how much supply do we think we need? And I think relying on not only ourselves in that, but also those partnerships alleviated those challenges where we were able to deliver that vaccine in December of 2020 and start that rollout. The fabulous partners and suppliers that we have out there, for sure. We were all in it together.
Right, exactly. I mean, crisis sort of focuses everyone's efforts in a particular way. So that's really fortunate.
Yes.
Another question, how did you reward successes, the small ones as well as the major ones? And as a follow-up, what was done for failures?
It's interesting. I remember sometimes being on calls, and when we would hit a mark of how many doses were, you know, that we achieved in production, we would quickly say, oh, I quickly need to thank everybody. We, achieved whether it was, 100 million doses. Okay, but now we got to get on and get to the next thing. So, so, I must say we celebrated in moments, in quick moments of time. And it was great to see those milestones, but we still had such a journey ahead of us that I think maybe now has been the time more recently where we've been able to take a step back and do a little bit more of those celebrations of what we actually achieved. But through the pandemic, we were quick and we did things when we could, but we had to keep moving. So the celebrations were short and sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's the same with the failures. We worked together as a team. You collaborated, and like I said, we had calls daily, weekends, multiple times a day. So when there were issues, we just rallied as a team and countered each one by one. And I still will go to the fact that Operation Warp Speed and the US government were vital in allowing us and working with us through some of those challenges that we had. And without their support, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did during that time.
Yeah, it sounds like failure was more about, rather than a company or a particular set of people in the group, internal to the company, had failed, more so as it sounds like you addressed it more as like, okay, here's the challenge. How are we going to move on from this, or how are we going to solve it? As opposed to like the blame game or whatever.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, cool. I wanted to touch on one thing you mentioned early on in your talk about mentoring, and how you've benefited from various mentors. Mm-hmm. And so tell me what approach you took to sort of connecting with mentors. And then how do you feel like you yourself are now taking on a mentoring role instead of the mentee?
Oh, that's a good question. I've had some fabulous mentors in my life. I remember the start of my career at Price Waterhouse. When you have good mentors, they stay with you forever and you remember them forever. And one was a partner there that kind of took me under her wing and guided me through those consulting years. And I still keep in touch with her to this day. And that's the value of a mentor. With any time you can, even though you haven't talked in years, when you do reach out, it feels like you've talked yesterday. And then I had excellent mentors at Amgen, and one in particular, who I think very highly of, who introduced me to the world of sourcing and procurement and said, I think you should consider this as an opportunity at Amgen and take that on as a career. Why didn't you interview for this role? And she was right. She knew me well enough of combining my interest and love for what I enjoy doing. And that was a pivotal moment in my life that I definitely remember as well. I've had mentees in my life as well. One just called me recently and said, he used to work for me in my previous role, but said, I'm looking for a new job. Can you help me navigate what that would be like, transitioning and negotiating an offer? So I'm always there to lend a hand of other team members. And I'll tell you what's very special too is graduating from Brown. And I don't just say that because I'm doing a Brown talk. I truly mean that. I want people on the call to understand this. We have a small group at Brown. And even though I graduated in 2017, we have every other at least monthly calls. And we talk about our careers, our challenges, our issues, and that Brown experience. And I truly, value what that education brought to me in my career, but it's the relationships that also came out of that I have friends forever. So I would just say for those on the call, find those people that you can be yourself with, that you can talk about, that you can ask questions or give advice. It's just so important to have such strong mentors. I think it's what carried me through, and I'm a strong believer of paying it forward.
Awesome. You just answered one of the questions that was in the chat here, which was about lessons learned at Brown. So great job. You predicted that one. So a follow-up on the question about culture, can you further describe the firsthand the work environment and culture you've experienced at Moderna? How do you describe the philosophy of the company?
So I think the philosophy is, that's a good question. I mean, I'm going to go back to those values. I understand philosophy versus culture. I kind of see them intertwined in some ways, but I'm going to stand by that. Those mindsets and the values of the company is truly what grounds people when they're hired. We actually ask questions in the beginning of one's hiring and onboarding as we're interviewing them, how they see the mindsets and how the mindsets could do for them in their potential new role. We stand by those values, and that is the philosophy around the company. We are innovative, and as I alluded in the talk, the technology and the scientists and the experience that is held within Moderna is so strong. It's absolutely impressive. So the philosophy of that company is growing, to be innovative, to serve patients, and to meet the needs of serving illnesses out there that may not have cures or opportunities for those patients. And I just think there's a lot of growth to be had. And I think it's going to be an exciting time of what Moderna is going to be doing these next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. So here's another question about when you made the jump from that safe company to Moderna. Was there anything in particular that made jumping from big pharma such as Amgen easier? Was there a pivotal event or series of events that said now's the time? It was sort of pre-pandemic when you made that jump.
Oh, that's a good question. So 16 years is like a marriage.
Yeah,
right? In one's life, it's a long time, right? And Amgen was an incredible journey for me as well. When I took the job at Moderna, I realized how much I'd learned and valued from Amgen. So Amgen was definitely the stepping stone into my career, into my interest of sourcing and procurement. And they allowed me to grow in that environment. And then what I was able to do at Moderna was to apply everything that I learned at Amgen and then replicate those experiences into my situation at Moderna. However, I will say one thing about that. I experienced things at Moderna that I had never experienced in my life, living through a pandemic, right? So I don't think any company, has lived through the Defense Production Act. And I can't say that Amgen taught me some of those things. But I do think there were other skills that you can't learn in the workplace that you use in those times of urgent, critical situations that you may learn throughout your education or family that you bring together in those moments, and how you would quickly resolve an issue or think on your feet to get raw materials. But nowhere in my career, I've always thought, gosh, I just went through this and how did I just do it? I would joke and say, okay, when I have my resume and all I was going to do on my resume was put Moderna, period. Because what were the bullets I was going to put underneath, right? And I can't imagine interviewing and someone saying, well, what was your most challenging time? You know how you have those interview questions, right? So I would always think, okay, so how am I going to answer those questions? My stories would be endless. But look, I've taken everything in my career and I've used them into what I have done in these last 2.5 years for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to prepare a presentation for us and to walk us through this amazing journey, and probably very unique journey for you, for all of us as we've lived through the pandemic. But your company had a special role, and thank you to you and to the company for the amazing journey that has helped all of us get back to some sort of normal. Eventually, we're still on that road, I think, but really appreciate your time tonight, and we'll be sure to join us in the future for our other sessions. We have another one coming up in October, and we're planning one for November. So please, everyone who's on the call, appreciate your time spent tonight, and thank you again, Dionne, and we will have more lessons in leadership in the future. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Sandy. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.